session to order. This is the February 28, 2023 work session of the Pinehurst Village Council. We have several items on this agenda tonight. Having called the meeting to order, we'll go to our first order of business, which is discussing Neighborhood Advisory Committee policy. Jeff, I think you'd like to make a presentation with the material we've seen in the Novus, and let's carry right on with that.
All right, thank you, John. I'm going to start with this map because this is kind of one of the key points we left off on when we last talked about this together many months ago. But as you recall, one of the significant challenges, if you will, or problems that we have right now with the NAC is that it doesn't really represent all of the village of Pinehurst. And we wanted to create a geographic framework that ensured that, or that at least it's aspired to have every one of our residents represented by somebody that they could connect with in an effort to facilitate better two-way communications between the village government and our residents.
And I'd like to just add to that, Jeff, that is one of the basic things we were trying to achieve starting a year ago on this, was getting some coverage in places around the village that weren't part of the NAC and expanding that.
Yeah.
That's really one of the basic things we've been trying to accomplish, and I think this map helps to understand that. So please carry on, though.
Thank you, John. And so, as I said, this is kind of where we left off on this, and my recollection was that everybody was fairly happy with this approach geographically. Of course, there's always room for continued tinkering with this, but the way it kind of settles out is you wind up having 20 geographically defined neighborhoods that would be represented on the NAC, and you know, some of them are very easy. I mean, they're not easy and non-controversial. Pine Wild, CCNC, number 6. Well, they're not all completely non-controversial, because I'll again call attention to the fact that with number 6, we added in, where are they?
Pinehurst South and
Spring Lake Hills.
Spring Lake,
that little townhouse development that's kind of an appendage up there, because they wouldn't have representation otherwise. And so it's not a completely clean way to carve up the village of Pinehurst, but we try to make best use of existing defined neighborhood boundaries and geographical boundaries and otherwise to come up with this list. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions or comments on this framework?
Geographical framework?
Of
the maps.
I like it.
The map, yeah.
I like it.
I think you've done a really good job of incorporating some of these new areas and combining several together to make what would, I think, be a manageable neighborhood in the system, and retaining, for the most part, well, almost to 100%, the orientation we've had for many years. So the map I'm more comfortable with now than I might have been even a few months ago, and following where some of the streets are, Highway 5, Cherokee, Linden Road, all that is, I think I see that better in this map now than before.
What's the difference between this map and the way it is now? I guess that's my question.
Much of the village is not represented by anybody right now.
But as far as the neighborhood breakout, the neighborhood listing,
It's.
I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, Pine Wild is Pine Wild, CCNC is CCNC. Currently, there aren't any geographic boundaries that are currently defined in the Greater Lake community. You have the Lake Pinehurst Association which has always had a representative on the NAC, but there really wasn't a defined boundary, I don't recall. We had a neighborhood called Oakmont Circle. We had another one up there somewhere else to the north, on the northwest side, but they didn't expand out to
Right.
include everybody.
well, I guess, again, we had 18 neighborhoods listed in the several meetings that I went to this past year. And And I'm trying to understand, we had 18 there, and now we have 20.
Yep,
So that means we've added 2.
yeah.
What are the 2 we added?
We didn't. We didn't simply add 2. It's a complete restructuring. I say complete because it was, we started from scratch and tried to define, as I said before, neighborhoods that made sense. And as a result, many of the neighborhoods that were in the old framework are roughly the same or exactly the same as what's depicted in this map. And in other areas, there are very major changes because we had to try to throw our arms around everybody.
Jeff, did George Lane set this up?
Yes,
Yes.
I can answer that because I was there.
Okay, and I'm just trying to understand the background a little bit, like when was it set up and was there a format then or was it just very informal?
Set up roughly in 2008, 9, maybe, something like that. I happened to be asked by George to join this group at the NAC, and several of the members and neighborhoods that are in the NAC currently are the original ones. There are a few things added over the years, as I recall. I think I didn't really know George at that time. We came to know each other, but I think his intention was to, use some organizations that existed in the village, mainly homeowners associations or individuals he knew were active, and form this group as a starter for what then became where we are today.
So
Jeff, there was a resolution at one point that was adopted establishing this, but it was a few years after the actual group began to meet with Mayor Lane and other members.
But it never started out with defined neighborhoods. And,
I think it started out with easily defined neighborhoods.
but it's evolved to the point that it needs some more structure, is what it sounds like, from what George envisioned back then.
Well, as I said a minute ago, it became obvious to me in the last several years that there were a number of neighborhoods, groups of neighborhoods perhaps, that were not represented at all. And growing from a population in Pinehurst, which in 2005, when I moved here, was,
7,000.
where were we then? 10,000, 11,000, now we're 17. And the neighborhoods have been built out tremendously, whole new neighborhoods, larger than were there before, that we needed a way to be more inclusive and get more people involved. So I see, there's a few neighborhoods, as Jeff said, I think that are restructured a little bit here. Old Town East and West would be part of that, little change. And many of them been added on, I think, by Jeff's work in looking at how we could put all this together. Does that help, Lydia, on the sort of background?
Yeah.
But maybe Jeff need to carry on with your answer to the question there. Pat?
Again, I'm matching up the last list I went to with this list.
Yeah.
And to sort of have a to and from, so I understand what are the additions that I'm, there's lawn and tennis, there's Cotswold now, there's currently we have Lake Pine, let me see, make sure I say it correctly. We have Lake Pinehurst, but we don't have West Lake, North Lake, or East Lake. So those are 3 new additions, according to.
I don't think they're completely new additions. Like, for example, I think on that old list, there was an Oakmont Circle.
On the old one, I never saw Oakmont Circle. No.
Always had for many years, we had a representative from Oakmont Circle.
No.
That's I think, is in North Lake, Pinehurst.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not listed on the list of the meetings of the NAC that I've been going to.
So you're looking at a list, and we had representatives that weren't even on that list. So there wasn't any structure, Pat. It just was what it evolved to be.
And we didn't, now I see we were adding, literally here is Walker Station, and that wasn't on our last meeting list, so that's another new one.
Now, Walker's been on the NAC for a few years now.
Well,
In fact, they became a member of the NAC because there were some individuals in that neighborhood who wanted very much to be a part of the NAC, and they had a pretty active member on the board for the first couple of years.
And
More
going along
recently,
the
they
lines
haven't
with the-
attended.
With the restructuring comment I made previously, it's not, the new membership wouldn't be simply Walker Station, it's East Midland Road, because there's nobody else representing all the rest of those folks.
so this new structure, East Midland Road would be the rep, and that rep would represent those four.
That's right.
And that rep could be from one of those four neighborhoods.
Yep.
Okay, so that's 18, okay. And the same is North Morganton Road, where right now we do have lawn and tennis.
You also
A
have
fellow named
Woodlands,
Lee Smith, and we have Woodlands.
but nobody's representing Fairway
That
Townhomes.
Beverly Reynolds is Woodlands, but there's no Fairway Townhomes.
Right.
Okay, so that's new. Now, we have.
Nobody's representing Abington Square, nobody is representing what's yet to be developed in Pinehurst South Cottages.
Right, that's a whole new one. The number 20 on this
Nobody's
list,
representing Magnolia on Knoll.
that's all new, number 20.
Nobody's representing Midland Road East. Nobody's representing the estate lots or La Forêt or Winston Pines.
But that would be under Linden West,
That's right.
which under this, as I'm reading it, I would think then, since we do have someone representing Cotswold right now, that person could then represent Linden Road West.
That would be a good alignment, yes.
Okay. And so now the Old Town West we've had for a long time, and then we had downtown residential area with a separate person. Now, is Old Town East and Old Town, is Old Town East, which is a new title, would that represent downtown residential area?
I think what was depicted, or there was no boundary, right? But my understanding of what the downtown residential area, grouping of 30 or so residences, for the most part, fell within what I'm calling Old Town West here.
So,
I think that's right, Jeff, and that's where it crosses Highway 5.
Yeah.
There's a portion of that on the
So-
east side of Highway 5
Yes.
and the rest on the west, so it is part of
Kind of the
west.
stuff that's, I mean,
Yeah.
immediately to the south of and west of the
so are
of the
we
hotel.
would we be keeping then the commercial downtown area intact? And that would become part of Old Town West?
Commercial downtown area is mostly, in this plan, part of Old Town East.
Well,
But there's not but the commercial area isn't really a residential neighborhood, but
Right.
it's under that geographical footprint.
Town East is new, Old Town West we've had. That was the Collini one. Then we go back to the Lake Pinehurst part now. Why wouldn't we take West Lake, North Lake, and East Lake and put them under Lake Pinehurst?
Because that's like 3,000 homes.
Okay? And I know this one has village, your list has village, number 7, of which we've really never had anybody. It's never been on any of our previous lists.
Yeah.
So it's either we didn't have anybody or we didn't treat it as a separate
No,
neighborhood.
At various times, number 7 was active, but
Yeah.
again, their HOA changes and they don't,
Been a recruiting challenge, and it probably will
Yes.
be in the future, but, yeah.
this is the map where the red circles really show the newest ideas as to location, Jeff. Am I
No.
right in that?
The
red circles?
The red circles are really just small areas that were hard to call attention to
Hard to identify.
without drawing a red circle on.
Where would Short Road be in this map?
Old Town East.
Old Town East.
among many other parts of that area, which is not actively, is not a part of NAC now.
Commercial is mostly would be in would the Pinehurst Civic Group still be listed here or not?
Not,
I mean, I know it's not now, so
Yeah.
you're saying drop them, okay.
Jeff, I think you said, but I believe incorrectly, that in the new map, this one here, but we don't have the detail of the streets, the downtown commercial district would actually be in the west, the way the streets are carved out.
I think
That's
it's,
the one I asked about that.
I think it's mostly in the east, but there is, for
Some is in
example,
the
the
west.
hotel, I think, is in the west.
Correct.
Well,
It would roughly be Carolina Vista or
Yeah,
Azalea Road or something
Yep.
to the west across Highway 5 into what was and has been Old Town West, but has not been represented in recent years.
Well, I suppose we could always move the lines a little. I mean, these lines aren't cement. This isn't a, reapportionment of the United States Congress.
I just tried to do my best job to
I'm
find.
with you. That's fine. Okay, so
Made sense of
those
it.
lines could move. Now, let's go back to, Cotswold could do that. That's brand new. Let's return to, does the west, north, and east Pinehurst Lake areas, do they have their own association now?
None.
None. So they're not very organized,
They're not organized at all.
despite all those homes. So what makes them not part of Lake Pinehurst Association? In other words, what
They're not
has,
invited to be part of
If
the
I can
Lake
answer
Pinehurst
for
Association.
my friends here, they're not on the lake. The Lake Pinehurst
Yeah.
Association is homes.
I
that-
think by their charter, Lake Pinehurst Association is limited to lots that are
Right.
either adjacent to the lake or the lot across the street from that, something
Right.
like that.
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
So that leaves a huge area out there that, is not represented.
And those folks, west, north, and east, have never tried to get a representative? Or have they, I'm trying to
There's
understand.
never been an organization, so like I said, I'll use the Oakmont Circle example again. We've had people from those areas that said, hey, I'm a neighborhood too, I'm Oakmont Circle. And they come in and they're really just representing the 30 or so homes around them. There was never any structure to allow them to represent the broader neighborhood, if you will.
So how will it happen now?
So what we would do is we would publish this list and create this structure, and then we would recruit for representatives to represent those neighborhoods, and then we would assist them in building contact and email lists through our marketing efforts to connect them with the residents in their footprint. And it won't be perfect. It won't, I mean, in those neighborhoods, it can never be as saturated, if you will, as it is in the Lake Pinehurst Association or Pinewood or CCNC, because there isn't that existing structure to rely on, but we're trying to do something better than what we have right now.
Jeff, I'm probably jumping way ahead in the conversation, but I really liked what Jeff Hines said in his email. Is it possible to kick this back to NAC and let them thoroughly discuss it? And even maybe, I was thinking about the possibility of forming a committee where you have 3 old-timers and 3 new-timers and let them get together and talk. I like the structure, they might want to tweak it, but, having served on NAC for so long, and it was very beneficial, but very informal, and I think the formality of this is scaring them a little bit. So, like I said, I like Jeff's idea of kicking it back to them and let them not just sit in a meeting and talk about it, but go off and make some proposals to us.
I don't think that was just
We can do
Jeff
whatever
Hines'
you
idea.
want.
That was,
We're
Sanborn
here
made that.
because I was told the council wanted to hear this tonight. So
And you're exactly right. And then Jeff was really good about sending in comments, and other people were sending in comments. And one thing we heard from him is, we've never really discussed this.
But again, Jeff Sanborn, A lot of Jeffs around here. Jeff Sanborn, I thought in his email, or his memo, said that this would go back to the NAC. Didn't you say that?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
so-
trying
We
to
do, but
figure out-
I think Lydia's suggesting we go to the NAC first.
my proposal is let NAC, some of whom have been on there for a very long time, and then get some new people and let them share their ideas, because they're the boots on the ground, and they might have some ideas that they could live with, that we could live with, and they could feel like they've got some skin in the game because they're proposing to.
I made a point of going to all these meetings because I learned so much at them, and I find them very interesting. And like any volunteer organization that I've ever been associated with, there are always some people that are more active than others, some people who show up versus some who don't show up. And so you end up going to, this is not the best analogy, it's one I like from Donald Rumsfeld. You end up going to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you had, okay? So whoever's going to show up and participate and roll up their sleeves, that's who you have to hash things out and get ideas from and have communications going back and forth. As much as I'd like to see that we have someone from number 7, as far as I can tell, I've never been in a meeting with someone from number 7 at the Neighborhood Advisory Council. And if someone showed up, I would welcome them. But again, you can't get blood from a
But
stone.
if the NAC members knew that we would appreciate some changes, and they could give us some ideas, and they might have some ideas about how, I think the recruitment might better come from them than come from us. If they knew that they were involved in it, and we gave them gave them some direction, what we're looking for, and asked them to give us their ideas for how we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And for me, number one is trying to get more representatives in the neighborhood, in these neighborhoods. Because NAC, having done it as long as I've done it, and you've been there, you have the same people from the same, I want to say same people from the same neighborhoods, but you do have the same representatives of the same pockets of Pinehurst. And there's so many that are missing. And they might have some ideas about how we can do that.
Well, but those have already been expressed. I mean, we've heard that over the last year when we've discussed it at the NAC. We've had a number of comments to us over the last weeks and days even. So yeah, I think we're getting that. And our business here tonight is to reflect on the overall plan that has been put together, make some ideas of consensus of the council, what we want to see, take that back to the NAC, get their feedback, and make a final plan from that. But there's sort of 3 stages here, or 3 key parts of this discussion. One is the map, which we've been talking about for a while, and how the new neighborhoods particularly fit into that map. And I'm quite comfortable now, subject to maybe a little tweaking here and there, but how that map's been put together as Jeff did before. So I think if we're comfortable enough with the map as a group in the council, we can move on from that, knowing we'll take this back to the NAC, and let's talk about 2 or 3 other things that are on the plan.
I'd like to see what the NAC membership says about the map. They may have some ideas that we missed, or I can't see. And I also, we're going from 18 neighborhoods currently to 20, which is fine, great. The question always becomes whether you get representatives for all those neighborhoods. And again, it's a voluntary effort, and hopefully we get a lot of interest, but we'll see. But so in essence, this map, based on the discussion we've had, we would want the NAC members listen to our discussion, look at the map, and if they have some suggestions, we take it up at the next NAC meeting, or in between. They may have some suggestions and say, if you draw this line this way and that way, it'll make a lot of sense.
Seems like we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay? Which is, we looked at this before, we identified that we wanted more representation to make sure everybody in the village was represented. There's going to be some realignments. It's not going to be perfect. This is a working product right here. We've talked about that. I think it's a good working product at this point in time. I like the efforts on there. And to put that back with the NAC, see what they have to say for it, and work with it back and forth seems like a reasonable plan. Anybody saying anything different?
Nope, I'm fine.
But Jeff, what this does
Exactly
is,
right, you're exactly right on this, but there's a couple other parts of the NAC plan I think we ought to discuss tonight.
Okay.
And
Let's
Jeff's
move
got
to that.
those teed up to show us, I think.
If you want.
Yeah. So I think from the map, we understand it a lot better now. We will review that with the NAC. And there are other parts that we should talk about too, because I think I was helping looking through this memo about, terms and how we should do that and looking into the future a little bit, knowing that, at least in my view, maybe others, I think people who are on the NAC now, and according to the memo Jeff has put together, are going to continue. We're going to look at some term ideas that Jeff's proposed and discuss that with the NAC. But there is a way to create some turnover over time. But at least initially, people who are on the NAC are going to be in it for another year or two, or however the terms work
Yeah,
out.
or maybe
That's my
more
view.
if they were just recently appointed.
However we
Yeah.
want to do it.
Yeah.
You want to take us through that a little bit, Jeff?
Sure. I think it'd be helpful probably just to start more with the general statements of purpose and policy. What I'm suggesting is the purpose of the policy is to define the purpose, membership requirements, member expectations, and village support to members of the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, because there is no such structure right now. So, and then a statement of policy that I've drafted for you is, it's the policy of the Village of Pinehurst Council to maintain a neighborhood advisory committee to foster and enhance effective two-way communications between village government and village residents aimed at building and protecting quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors. Probably more heavily on the resident side. Actually, I thought about just saying residents there, but I kept it more in line with our overall mission statement. No, Jane?
Well, I'm thinking that this is really about the residents. Because it's the Neighborhood Advisory Committee.
Yeah, that's the reason I originally had it drafted that way. I personally could go
Yeah.
either way. I don't.
Well, I think that the key point there is that's two-way communication between village government and village residents. Okay? Now, between those, it's aimed at building and protecting quality of life for residents, businesses, and visitors, which is the overall mission that we're talking about. So it is a organization that's with the residents and with the village government. It's not with the residents and visitors. Okay? So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem at what it's aimed at in doing.
And I think that part of the reason I went back and added businesses and visitors is quite often we get quality input from our residents, sometimes through the NAC, about, things that happen in the downtown center that impact businesses and visitors and everything else. So, we're still, not all of the quality input we get from our residents is about quality of life for residents.
So keeping businesses there makes some sense. I don't know about the visitors, which perhaps is Jeff Morgan's point, yeah. I mean,
I guess my point is that the conversation is between residents and government. If they want to talk about visitors, I got no problem them talking about visitors. If they want to talk about pets, I got no problem them talking about pets, okay? It's what it's aimed at. What's the quality of life overall? So you could also just say aimed building and protecting quality of life, period.
Quality of life, period?
We could say that. But my point is, I don't want to restrict a conversation with the NAC. If the NAC wants to go over here, because that's important, then let's listen to what they have to say. I don't care what direction it's going, whether residents, business, visitors, pets, swing sets, whatever, okay? We have got them, or we're trying to build this structure here, so we get input as to what's important, period.
I'm happy to leave it.
I'm good, comfortable with a period after the word of life.
Quality of life?
Jeff, do you mean to say government and village residents aimed at building and protecting instead of aimed at that?
Yes.
Read right over it.
I'm going to let the specific semantics come in and after the NAC gets part of it too, and
Right.
a little cut on this. I look at our role right now as giving general guidance of what we're trying to do. Okay, and that is to make sure we've got an organization, a neighborhood advisory committee, that is representative of the community. And if there's not representative, it's not because we didn't include their neighborhood, it's because they couldn't get somebody. Okay, so your point's well taken from there. And that they can talk about whatever's of concern and the quality of life of what goes on. And we have a two-way communication there. Isn't that the intent? So the specifics to it from there, it's a cut on what they have to say, what we have to say, and just like Jeff Hines talked about before, I'm sure we can work through it and get a product that's going to be very effective for all of us. Two-way communication.
What it's always been about.
Okay, so I also drafted some goals here for this policy statement. The first being collaboratively build effective communications between all committee members and the neighborhoods as they represent.
Jeff,
And
time-
that's really aimed at the neighborhoods that have no structure. So that discussion we had earlier about, East Lake Pinehurst, for example, there's no structure existing there. So we're going to have to help them get stood up.
Well, and that's something, and I think when we first started talking about this, is you have people to come to at NAC and they say they're speaking for their neighborhood, but I don't know how they can speak for their neighborhood because there's no neighborhood structure.
Yes.
You have one person, and so you don't know if this person is speaking for him or herself or for a neighborhood, and I don't.
Or their four closest neighbors, or?
Exactly.
But that is a nature of an organization like this. We have it's a volunteer from Cotswold, okay? And we're working from the assumption that that person.
We're trying to do is extend the reach of our two-way communications path.
Right. All I'm saying is we should not over-expect that the representative from each one of these neighborhood groups is like Paul Revere and is going to bring us this message every time.
I
It's
don't
not-
have that
I
expectation.
just think we got to be careful. These meetings, you can tell there's some people that are bringing you messages from a lot of people. There's some that have got a hobby horse. There's some that don't have much to say. And
I'm not trying to change that. I'm not trying to send them out to become something greater than they are in their neighborhood. I just recognize there's some people when they speak, you don't know if they're speaking for them, for a small group or for the entire neighborhood, and that's just,
Right, and I think that to Pat's point, I mean, we have to be realistic about these outcomes, and we're not going to get to perfect, but we can endeavor to do better, and that's
Yeah.
what we're trying
Right.
to do here.
I just want to set expectations.
Second goal, use effective neighborhood communications means to distribute notes from presentations and discussions that take place at monthly NAC meetings. Third, use those effective neighborhood communications means to collect input and feedback from residents. Fourth, communicate and discuss trends and common themes related to resident perceptions that can help village government better achieve its quality of life mission. And then fifth, comply with the North Carolina Public Records Open Meetings Law requirements. And I explicitly list that one here because it's a significant hurdle that we've got to overcome with this policy.
My only comment is that on bullet 2, I really would be interested in what the NAC says back to us when they comment on this about distributing notes and presentations and discussions. I'm trying to think of the realistic way it occurs.
Well, that's
So-
where,
I don't have an answer, that's why
I agree. It's going to largely depend on our effectiveness in collaboratively helping them build communication structures across their represented neighborhoods. And then we're going to have to be able to share the products that we present to them electronically so that they can just push it out, I think. For example, there may be other ways that.
I'd be curious what they come back to us because, they're where the rubber meets the road. They each have their own sort of ways of communicating with folks in their neighborhood, whether it's through their homeowners association, whether it's through some other neighborhood group, whether they have their own email list. I don't know, but that's what I'm looking for to find out.
And we won't have, we won't get a perfect outcome.
No, no.
Okay, so membership of the NOC will be made up of one representative from each of the each of the geographically defined neighborhoods included in the neighborhood map, which we covered earlier. Members must be permanent residents of the neighborhood they represent. The NEC neighborhood map may be adjusted as needed by vote of the village council, and members will be individually appointed by the village council upon recommendation by a committee made up of the village managers and village clerk. That's subject to input and change. The recommendation will give appropriate deference to candidates recommended by homeowners associations or other neighborhood organizing bodies. The degree of that deference will correspond to the degree to which said organization body or organizing body represents all residents within the village's defined neighborhood. And so what we're really talking about that is, there are neighborhoods like Pinewild where we know for a fact that every neighbor, every resident, every homeowner is represented by that organization. And so we should give Pinewild a very, very, very high degree of deference with regard to selection of somebody to represent that neighborhood. There are other neighborhoods where participation in a non-homeowner association organization that's more like a civic group has more spotty results. And therefore, we're going to give them deference because they have the communications means to reach a whole bunch of people, but it's not the same degree of deference that you would give to, for example, Pinewild. And there are other examples like that as well.
How have we selected all these people in the past, aside from the Pinewild example you've just given?
They volunteered, and we said, okay, come to the table.
Well, originally, they were all identified by George Lane, maybe with Andy Wilkinson at that time, I don't know. And people were contacted and they joined.
But over
Either they came
time.
from a homeowner association or some other place. I think the recruitment issue here is particularly important for the new areas on the map who haven't had any contact before. And I think we're going to have to give some assistance to those places in finding people that would be interested and qualify. Right. I think the pushback of it, though, comes from those areas that already have representatives who have an HOA of some sort or another, some more strong than others, but they are offering up their person, and that's their business.
I think the big pushback comes from organizations that have representation, which we've said we're going to give them deference. So,
Right.
Does the
I think that, and I think we should certainly respect that representation. But I guess I would caution you all to remember that this is a Village of Pinehurst organization, and I'm not comfortable using language that doesn't leave the final say with you five.
Do these people, I don't recall ever voting on someone as a member of the village council to appoint someone to our neighborhood advisory committee?
Never done it before.
Never done it. Okay, that's fine. I'm just making sure my memory is correct.
And I'm not really looking to get into that business either.
I'm not either. But having said that, I've noticed some people have changed during the course of this year. Some names that were here on the January meeting I went to in 2023 versus the November meeting in 2022 have changed. And I gather they just came recommended by the previous person, or they assumed a new role in the homeowners association or something.
Right.
Yeah, that would have happened.
Okay.
That would have happened several times.
But
But the critical part is being able to identify representatives from these new areas especially, and that's where I think involvement of the council, village manager would be helpful in doing that. Because we'd have no other way of finding individuals unless we were out there recruiting.
I'm not
And
so
it will
sure.
just,
And in
it'll
fact-
it'll formalize that process for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's-
We all understand, we can forecast when the terms are expiring and everything,
Right.
so there's more
This is an area for discussion.
more
with
clean expectations for everybody involved.
Right.
I'd just like to say, the Planning and Zoning Board conducts village business. The beautification committee conducts village business, and so does the bike ped committee. But this is different. This is the village providing an opportunity for residents to come in and spend time with their government people, council and staff. And so it's not that they're helping the government perform its work, it's that they're coming and talking to us. And so because of that, I don't think we should be appointing the reps.
I guess probably a whole host of comments to make on that, but I fundamentally disagree that they aren't doing village business, because they aren't just, this isn't a town hall. They aren't just coming in and telling us what they think, right? What we want is for them to collect and synthesize information from a wide variety of residents in their neighborhood and bring that back to us. They are performing a volunteer function that helps us function better,
Do they do that now?
some better than
Absolutely.
others.
Absolutely. And some better than others, yeah. When you use the word synthesize, Jeff,
Yeah.
tell me a little more about that, though. I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure that,
Well, I
because
mean,
it's key to your
it's-
thought, I think.
So sometimes we get feedback that is anecdotal.
It is
Anecdotal, and it's one-off,
anecdotal.
right? And we listen, and of course, we listen to that feedback, but we don't have the ability to place that feedback in proper context, because it's just one person's observation or opinion or whatever, right? And I'm not belittling individual observations and opinions, but what's more valuable to the village is the trends that people in the NAC, if they're connected to a wide variety of people and having regular interactions on topics that are important in the village today, can synthesize that and communicate themes about what they're hearing from residents.
But that's necessarily predicated on their ability to get this information from their neighborhoods,
Yes.
which is back to what my concern's been all along. These are just people who live in this little defined area. And I'm not sure, I don't know how effective we're going to be to establish these communication systems that then will give what you're describing.
So if we can't aspire to that, we shouldn't have a neighborhood advisory committee. We should just have a collection of residents.
Well, I mean, Jane, when you were describing it, it's always been valuable to me to go to one of these things and hear what the village has to say to me. And I could turn it over to Pinewell, some can't. And then sometimes they would come with good feedback from the neighborhood, but it always seemed informal, and I don't know how successful we're going to be to set up more structured mechanisms in some of these. But
I'm willing to bet it's going to be a learning process, and it's not going to be perfect when you come out the gates. But I think the whole intent of this is that you have certain neighborhoods that are very well organized, that do have a email list that can get all the information out. It was addressed as Pinewild being able to do that, and yes, they can. But you also have some areas that are not as addressed, are not as organized like that. And we as a village are going to put in some of our resources to be able to say, and efforts, to help them become more organized. That's how I'm seeing this. Am I wrong on that? We're going to help the ones that are not as organized to be able to say, get more organized with this and have
Absolutely right.
representation.
I totally agree.
It's an
That's what-
aspiration.
It's
Okay?
it's
And
an
that's where
aspiration.
these start from. It's not going to be perfect. Our map is not perfect. You know, you don't have, it's not equal representation, so to speak. It's not an election. There's all kinds of things that are fuzzy in this. But what we're talking about is being able to have information get down to folks, typically with email, okay, whether they read or not, different story, and have information percolate back up. I think it's a good organization that gives us information, and we're just trying to increase the representation and make it a little bit more equal, that's all.
And I like Jeff's comment about in using the word synthesize. I made a note, you talked about help us identify themes and trends that are going on in the village, and we can hear it from one neighborhood or another neighborhood, and we hear it from two or three, we know there's something going on here with a theme or a trend or an interest or, you know, sidewalks or not,
Yeah.
things like that.
We can even plant the seeds and say, hey.
Correct.
We're interested in these topics,
Yeah,
you know?
what do you think?
Go
What
talk
do
to
you
your
hear?
neighborhoods and come back to the next meeting and tell us what people are thinking, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
but without the geographic, framework described and without helping them build communications mechanisms in those places that don't have them already, we can't leverage that power.
Right. And one of our objectives overall has been, let's get better coverage, identify the people. It'll become even a better organization than it has been. I think that's the overall theme.
I think the better coverage of a few more neighborhoods is a good goal, a very achievable goal. I think we need to be careful to think we are building a team that's going to compete in the Super Bowl of neighborhood advisory committees. We become too aspirational of it. It is so, it is informal. I think the beauty of the NAC now is the informality of it. As much as I would like to have and be part of organizations that can churn out things and be so organized that it's, you know, you're precision-like, that is not how a neighborhood advisory committee will really function. It's just not going to be that way because we're dealing with all these individuals of all different ages who've come here from all different parts of the country, and I'm bought in on the geographics. We can figure that out. I just think we've got to be careful of how much we think we're going to turn this thing into a real internal combustion engine that's going to power us through. So
This isn't an elected body. This is not a representation of everybody to be able to mandate that's what goes on. It's a resource, it's a tool, it's information for us to help us as we are executing our responsibilities as elected officials. That's how I see it.
I agree, and I think we're actually saying the same thing, that maybe from a different level here, and that only is that we're not trying to set up the Hoover Institution or, you know, whatever. But we can gain better information for the village if we can expand this group a little bit, find the right people, and build on what we've got.
we're expanding now. Hope we find the right people. I feel comfortable predicting that we'll always have neighborhoods that don't have a representative.
There could
Why?
be.
It's just the nature
That
of
could
the
happen,
battle.
yeah.
It's just going to be that way. And they'll emerge in these meetings, people who are leaders or people who feel strongly on X, Y, or Z, and they may influence the other members of the NAC. And sometimes you get some real discussions of differing viewpoints. But anyway, we can, again, we'll get feedback from folks and
we will.
we can finalize it. Okay, what's the next
I
step?
have a question.
Go ahead.
How much time and effort do you think the village will be putting into trying to build these communication systems?
Can you more clearly define what kind of answer you're looking for there?
Well, it's just a subset to some of the other comments that were made. I mean, it's not that it's not a great goal.
Yeah. Well, I think that
But how far are we willing to chase it?
There'll be some discussion later on in this document about onboarding. Part of that onboarding will be the training to help them understand how to use the information technology tools that we're going to be providing for those that want to take advantage of those tools. And then beyond that, I think the lion's share of the village's support to that will be the direct leveraging our existing communications to reach as many people in neighborhoods as possible and encouraging them to connect with your representative at this email address and continue that over a period of time to try to expand that network. And the hope is that the more people you connect, the more relevant it gets. The more people see value in it, the more people you recruit, right? So, but you have to get over a critical mass to get there.
Let's move on to some others of the key points here.
Okay, so recruitment, I think fairly similar. We're recommending a process that's fairly similar to what we do for our other boards and commissions and volunteer groups. Talking about treatment of incumbent members, if they want to continue to serve. And we typically, for our Planning and Zoning Board and our HPC, if an incumbent wants to continue to serve, then we bring that person right back for a renomination, right? So in general, I think that NAC members would be treated the same way. Talk about new member orientation terms, term limits, and terminations. I mentioned an onboarding process. We do onboarding for all of our other key volunteers across the village. We'd like to have a similar process for NAC members. Completion of onboarding and signature of a volunteer agreement. We do currently it's limited to, I think it's limited to an ethics acknowledgement for all of our other volunteers. But we recognize the need to augment that with the public records requirements and things like that. So, and we would be doing the same thing for NAC members. We are suggesting you use the same framework for terms and term limits that you do for all of our other key board member volunteers. 2-year terms, a maximum of 3 terms for 6 years. One difference is, in order to try to make this work, recommending that no matter what month a member joins, their term will always expire in June. And we want to do it that way because we're likely to be dealing with multiples of these every year for recruitment purposes for new members. So if we align them for the term to end in June, we can take advantage of the summer off months to do recruiting. A mention of alternate members here. I don't know that this language that we've suggested is the right answer. Certainly open to comments on that. But we suggested a limit of 3 times per calendar year because we really want the same people to come back. We want their participation. We want the primary person to show up, right? So is 3 times per year the right upper limit to have an alternate president? I don't know. We suggested down here that alternate members would not be expected to make a report. And I don't think there aren't strong feelings on that one, probably in either direction. But I have witnessed a few times over the past several years an alternate member or somebody is filling in, coming in, and they don't even really know why they're there. and they're asked to give a report, and it's not clear that they knew they had to give a report. And if they did, they're coming to the table with things that aren't really cogent. So It's kind of awkward for everybody involved, so maybe it's better just to say, if you're the alternate member, you're there to take notes, but we're not asking you to give a report, so.
May I give my thoughts on those topics that you just covered? First of all, on alternate members, I see regular members who come in and sometimes and behave just like you talked about alternate members. So I would just say we should, if an alternate is going to show up, they should be able to say whatever they want to say, and they should be able to go back and report whatever they should report. I just don't think we should spend a lot of time. The alternate, I would suspect, is the alternate because the regular member has identified this person as someone they have a degree of confidence and relationship with, and they come and go and report back. So I really wouldn't get into sort of modifying how they're supposed to behave at those meetings. Two, I'm very much for new member orientation. I think that's a must. I'm not so sure that I agree. I'm a firm believer in term limits personally, but I'm not so sure I agree with 2-year terms. I just think that is so quick. For what we're talking about, we want people on here who, going to come in, roll up their sleeves. 2 years is sort of a short period of time. Do all our advisory board members now are 2 years for planning and zoning?
Three
and all these
2-year terms.
3 2-year terms. Okay. I don't know. It just strikes me as a little quick. But I'd be curious to see what NAC members themselves think. That's my instincts. I'm not comfortable with the idea that folks that are going to want to be an NAC member, in essence, need to be interviewed or reviewed by assistant village managers, village clerk, and the village manager. As competent as all those people are, I don't know if that's the right thing to interject in their appointment process, which we ourselves we're not going to actually vote on, unlike the advisory board folks. So I think that's changes the relationship a little, because I don't think that's how they get appointed now. That's why I was asking the questions, how all of a sudden these people show up and they've replaced somebody else, and I don't object to that.
People, they're not appointed now.
They're not. They show up.
Just
Or they're head of a homeowners association, or.
We're recommending structure.
I get it. I just don't know if that's the right structure that will sit well. I'll be curious to see what a lot of the members think. Maybe doesn't bother them. I just, anyway, I raised those 3 points. And again, this way, that way, I agree with the term limit. 2 just seems so quick to me, but if you've reminded me, it's 2 years for everyone else.
I think we've got a good product here to put forth and let the NAC take some cuts on it.
Yeah,
okay?
I
And just
agree.
do it,
I agree.
Okay?
It's-
And
they
then
have
I'm not, just like you, Pat, I'm not wed on all the stuff that's here. I want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
But I think we have a good work product to go forward. And I think that's what we need to do.
I do too.
Yeah, and I'd have to say with the term limits too, Pat, the idea here is that if the representative wants to continue for a second and a third term, that's there.
So it's not 2 years, if
It's potentially 6.
there's something objectionable going on, which we never expect that, and it doesn't happen very often, so you're talking about 6 years, not 2 years.
I honestly did not realize that our appointments, I'll just admit this, 2 advisory boards were 2-year appointments.
Well, we had some that were 3, but we moved them all
Yeah,
back to
we
2.
realigned everything. I don't recall
A
which one
mix.
was which, but one was 3 2s and the other one was 2
2
3s.
3s, right.
Yeah.
What threw me off. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
I think the other thing here, Jeff, is legal sort of documentation required to be in compliance with state regulations, the open meetings and that sort of thing. And we don't really have a lot of choice in that, I think.
Right. So the only other thing probably we probably should talk over is, and again, this is just a suggestion, but
Yeah.
so what you see on the second to left column here is, thanks, Kelly, is the proposed list of new neighborhoods, and there are some typos on this, so bear with me. And then what we did was we cross-referenced that to current members of the NAC and tried to show where that alignment is, right? Because those current members are the most logical people to continue to serve, in some cases, the same exact neighborhood, and in some cases, something slightly different, but we at least have a good jumping off point because we have great people that are volunteering already.
Jeff, Paul Spurgeon, I don't see his name on any of my
Who are you
previous
talking about?
lists. Paul Spurgeon,
That's-
number 16.
That's because he just started.
No. Oh. Is he replacing
No, that's all-
Pat
that's a-
Corso, or is he?
That's basically one of the new areas.
Can you
With
scroll
Cotswolds.
down?
That's not on there, so it must be replacing Pat.
But Pat showed up at the last one, so.
Yeah. The last several.
So he is replacing Pat.
Okay,
Okay, well, that explains it.
There you go.
Pat Corso, okay.
There are a couple of new people here in here from 2023, but, so what I'm recommending is that we've got these new neighborhoods that aren't currently represented, so this summer's effort would be focused on recruiting the new people. And we would retain everybody else except for the people that are double slotted right now. I'm sorry?
You have Debbie Leller and Charlie Collini.
Yeah. No, Debbie's been serving for 7 years now, so she's already exceeded, the new proposed 6-year term limit. So it made more sense to cycle her off than to.
Well, let me just say one
Collini.
thing on the term limit things. I don't think, I think term limit should start for everybody at one time, and your previous service should not get in your way.
Hear me out.
Go ahead.
Hear me out, all right? This is, so the first year, we're going to focus on the new people, the new requirements, all right? Now, there are some other people here whose terms would have already expired that we're saying, no, hold on to them for a while. But what we don't want to do is start everybody's term in the same year, because then you're replacing them all at the same time.
You'd stagger them.
We're building a staggering plan in here. So in some cases, we're talking about people ultimately serving 7 or 8 years, and in other cases, they're ultimately serving 6 years, with the exception of one, which was the gentleman from, can you scroll down again? Who's the other double-slotted one? Lee Smith, who I don't think has even showed up recently, right? So,
Yes, he's the lawn and tennis name, and my lists in the past, I don't have him checked off as an attendant.
I don't think he's been either at the January or February
so
meetings. I
to
wasn't
your earlier point, Patrick, we don't think it would be a good idea for everybody's 6-year term to start now, because if you assume the majority of them are going to serve their 6-year limit, then you're stuck replacing them all at the same time. Even if only half of them serve their 6-year limit.
Can you scroll back down? I want to see
Yeah.
a name for a minute. Oh, yeah, okay, I was looking for Lee Thomas's name. I see him, and he hasn't been here lately, but I recognize his name. Well, there's a way to stagger it. So I agree with, you don't want everybody disappearing at one time, so there is a way to stagger it. I just think we need to be sensitive to it.
So this structure, I mean, I think we probably need to continue to tinker with this a little bit, but this is an initial recommendation, and it is very much dependent on the geographical framework that maps. So,
Jeff, one thing here, you've used, I think, the year 2016 as a sort of base year for people, we don't really know when they started, or it's gone back over time. Isn't that the reason you have 2016 here several places? Can you spell it? Oh, you can, Kelly, you did? Oh,
application?
it was on, we had a record of that. When they applied, well, that would have been when they applied to be on any village committee,
Yeah.
right? Okay, oh, I wasn't
No,
sure. Records
it's a
were
good
back there.
question, John, because there are a couple of names on here, like, who am I thinking of? Tom Campbell. I've been here since 2015. I think he's been on the NEC ever since then, but.
Trust me, he's been on longer than that, yeah.
Yeah. But so you might be right. Some of these may actually predate that.
I thought it was just a base year that was
Unless he
selected.
rotated off at some point and came on or something.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay?
I think the structure is very helpful. I think we've,
So I will, we've heard some comments here, and we'll go back and circle the wagons.
and I made some notes on some things.
We've heard, and make some improvements to this, and then we'll bring it to the next
Yeah.
NEC meeting for feedback.
Yeah,
Is it something you'd be able to, once you've made your improvements and all, to circulate it to them before the meeting so that they, okay, thanks.
Jeff, thanks for putting that all that together. I'm glad we could move it forward now, and thanks for your presentation.
All right, so I got one more topic for you.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Bankham?
I'm looking down these high point. I see something you always see when you get a government organization.
Standing in the room, right?
Well, no, I'm looking at your notes that you just handed out. And I'm seeing one of those things that one always sees when there's a government organization being formed, and that is the association, the North Carolina Association of MPOs. They already
Same
have that.
thing, yeah,
It's
right.
everybody's got to have an association for it.
Yeah.
All right, lead us on
So
here.
this is an important topic. That's why I asked to put it back on the agenda. There's not a
Absolutely.
lot of new development here, but I just wanted to continue to have this dialogue with you.
Yep.
A little bit of feedback. MPOs aren't new. They've been around since 1962. That's when the federal mandate began. And I think it's true that ever since then, the same threshold of 50,000 people has been in place. We had this little question the last time we talked, where I couldn't say for certain whether I knew that this was a requirement or if it was you had an option to form an MPO. Based on the language I found in the law, I'm pretty sure it's a requirement. And I say that because if you look at that 450.310 language there from paragraph A, first word in the second line says shall. So an MPO shall be designated for each urbanized area with a population more than 50,000. Some of you may already found some of this information, but I just wanted to cross-level it for people. I found that there are a couple of websites out there that are very helpful. One is the National Association of MPOs, and that's ampo.org. And then there's a corresponding North Carolina Association, the ncampo.org. But what you can find on there actually is they have the list of, in North Carolina, they'll have the list of all of the existing MPOs, and then have a link to their website, and you can go onto their website, and you can find their bylaws and their voting requirements and how they're organized and a whole bunch of other information that can help us work with our neighboring communities in standing up this MPO. And then the same thing is true for the National Association website. I mentioned New Bern previously, and they are the most recently designated MPO in North Carolina. That happened in 2013, and their current population stands at about 59,000. It is a multi-jurisdictional MPO. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, it has 5 municipalities and 1 county government represented. I may be off by 1. It might be 4 municipalities. It's 4 or 5 municipalities and 1 county. However, the staffing is actually held within the New Bern city staff, because New Bern is kind of the big city in that area. So that's an approach that would not be appropriate for our MPO, because we're all kind of, there's Pinehurst and Southern Pines and Aberdeen, and we're all kind of roughly equal in size. So we're going to have to do something different, I think, in the future. I guess we don't have to. One of us might volunteer to be the hosting organization.
Jeff, will we become the smallest MPO if we, I don't know, the three of us, the communities we're smaller than New Bern. New Bern looks like the tiny one right now.
New Bern is the smallest, is currently the smallest one in North Carolina at 59,000. It's also the newest. And so we would become the newest and the smallest by a small margin. We're a little bit over 50,000.
That won't last too long.
So I asked last time, who designated this? And by that I mean, we've had coming up to 100,000 people in Moore County this whole time, and we haven't been declared an MPO.
The Census
And
Bureau.
if you take even today with this handout that we got last time, and you just look at Pinehurst, Southern Pines, and Aberdeen, and even if you throw in Whispering Pines, you're not at 50,000. So somebody took it upon themselves to say, well, let's rope in these certain ones, and all of a sudden now there's 50,000, whereas
We can tilt at windmills all we want, Jane, but the Census Bureau has designated us as an urbanized zone, and because they have designated us as an urbanized
The
zone, we're now
Census Bureau?
required. I'm sorry?
the
The
census,
Census Bureau, and that's by statute.
So
I think we know that.
Yeah,
That's
there-
been clear.
Jeff, just remind me, I mean, there's the three of us, Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst. Whispering Pines, who else is in that mix? Or is that
Pine
it?
Bluff, the county, Taylortown,
Taylortown,
Foxfire, Vass,
Fire, okay.
not
that's-
Foxfire.
Not Foxfire.
Yeah,
took them off, okay.
not necessarily. They're not, Foxfire is not in the defined urbanized zone,
why not?
Okay.
because it's not in the geographically defined area that the census defined.
It's got Foxfire in here.
It's not in, look, are you looking at the map?
I'm looking at
Oh,
the
that-
list from last
Okay, that's,
time.
This was what we understood a month ago.
well, it's not.
And
No,
it's
it's
not
just a list
correct.
of, it's a list of the municipalities or local governments that are on the map that we got from Matt Day, where he was describing to us, here's the census urbanized zone, and your MPO has to, at a minimum, include that urbanized zone and anything that you expect might become urbanized within the next 20-year planning horizon, right? So he had that defined limit, and then he drew another boundary as a thought starter at what we might think might become urbanized in the next 20 years, and that included Foxfire. So it's nearly all of Pinehurst. It's nearly all of Southern Pines. It's nearly all of Aberdeen. It's most of,
Whispering Pines, I think.
I want to say it's at least half of Whispering Pines, and it's about half of Pine Bluff. It's all of Taylortown. And then it's the parts of the unincorporated county area that's in that same kind of geographic footprint.
Whatever it is, we meet the 50,000 threshold, and that's what we are, huh?
It is.
Okay. It's what it is.
Okay,
but only by a hair and a freckle.
Well,
yeah. But
So
that won't last long.
how did they get this March 10 organizational meeting? That's an odd selection of people.
So I'm getting there. So Rocky Mount's the next smallest. They also have the the staffing embedded in the Rocky Mount staff. So there's not a good example out there. There's not a good small MPO example out there to compare ourselves to, given the relative similar size of some of our communities in this area. So, I don't know if this is defined as a requirement anywhere, but the organizing documents that I've looked at seem to similarly describe a committee called the TAC, which is the Transportation Advisory Committee, and a Technical Coordinating Committee. And the TAC is made up primarily of elected officials representing all of the local governments that are included. And I want to say there are a couple of other people that they suggest including as well. Maybe somebody from DOT or something. And then the Technical Coordinating Committee is typically made up of either a manager or a planner or a planning director or something from each of the municipalities, and then a representative from DOT, and if you had like an airport in the area, there'd be a representative from the airport. If you had a transit authority, there'd be somebody from the transit authority, and there might also be representatives like that on the TAC.
So basically, every one of the 50,000 souls is going to have to be on a committee.
Well, so again, you're talking about, at a minimum, you got to have a representative from Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen, Taylortown, Pine Bluff, Whispering Pines, Moore County. There's 7. I don't think the airport is in that current footprint, but it could be included, so you might have somebody from the airport. Transit authority, I don't know that the county's little van thing they send around is a transit authority, so they wouldn't have to be involved.
Well, for that person.
DOT representation, so now you're 8. You're probably at about, depending on whether or not you have weighted participation in voting based on the size of the jurisdiction, you might have somewhere between 8 and 15 members, for example.
And this will be,
Kind of like the Moore County Transportation Committee.
this will be replacing TARPO.
In our eyes, it'll be replacing TARPO. For us, it will fulfill all the functions that TARPO currently fulfills, plus some other requirements that are levied on MPOs.
So we won't participate in TARPO, will be all MPO.
TARPO is Triangle Area Rural Planning Organization, and an MPO is a municipal planning organization. So, and we're not going to be the Triangle Area anymore. We're going to be the Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen, Foxfire, Taylortown, Whispering Pines, Carthage one.
Gotcha. Life
Correct.
goes on.
And it is what it is.
Yeah.
And we're,
Exactly right.
let's,
How to eat this
correct.
elephant.
And so we're told to eat the elephant, and let's start it one bite at a time. From a 50,000-foot level, as we're talking about this, I think that we're the big dog in this also. And for us to have a plan or a agenda to get ahead of this as quickly as possible and work through it, I think, is to our benefit.
Jeff, I was looking at the rest of your memo here, and you've laid out some dates when there are going to be some meetings. We meet as a council on the 14th and the 28th of March. And I see on March 28th, you have the Tri-Cities meeting at which this is probably going to be discussed. So,
Right, so-
my thought would be in a month from now, unless you feel otherwise more urgently or earlier, we'll hear from you on March 28th with where things stand and what we need to do.
You mean on the agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe before that, because we got this March 10th date too.
Well, right. If you feel in advance of that, we need to meet. Fine.
Jeff, will you attend the March 10th date? The March 10th meeting?
Okay, so I'm going to talk you through something here. I'm not sure how this transpired, but we started this conversation a few weeks ago when we were contacted by Matt Day, who alerted us to this fact. right? And so he started this conversation with us, and then a week or two ago, time's flying, Reagan and Paul and I met with Matt and Lee Worsley from Triangle J to talk about this requirement, opportunity, maybe both, and what we should be advocating as you know, as managers as a way forward. At that meeting, we decided that it would make sense for us to advocate for this to be on the next Tri-Cities meeting agenda, March 28th, and to invite the other core local governments that are within the urbanized zone to initiate this conversation about how we develop bylaws, you know, voting requirements and things like that. And then we said, okay, we got this Moore County Managers meeting that's happening on the 16th, so we probably should also take advantage of that to bring in Matt Day and Lee into that organization, into that meeting as well, to socialize this thing with the broader community as well. Then, late last week, I got an invitation from Scott Walston. Some of you might recall Scott Walston from our Western Connector and development of our Moore County Transportation Plan days. He's an engineer that works for NCDOT, and he was coordinating a meeting on March 10th. And on that invite list were the managers of the associated local governments, except for Wayne Vest, and instead Frank Quist, and Pat Malamphy, and Natalie Hawkins. I don't know whose initiative this was, and I had a quick conversation with Reagan and Paul. They don't know either, but we're all going to go and we're going to participate and hear what we're going to hear.
And I think that's a good plan there. From my perspective, the way I'm seeing this is we have a new environment. It is what it is. We need to embrace it, and we need to get ahead of this, meaning that we need to participate in this, we need to be planning on this, and we need to find ways that we can actually make sure we're collaborative with the different communities that are involved in this, but also taking a leadership role in it, okay? And it's to our advantage to be able to do that. I don't know all the advantages of this MPO, I don't know the disadvantages of it necessarily, but I can tell you if we don't go to the table, and embrace it and lead on it, we'll find the disadvantages the wrong way.
And along those lines, I've talked before about, you know, the document that we use, whether it's an MOU or whatever, you know, however we establish this MOU is going to have to describe board membership, voting, and from a purely Pinehurst selfish standpoint, I think that we should be advocating for a proportionate share of membership and voting. And a way to do that would be to say each local government can be represented on the board and therefore have a vote for every 10% of the overall population. Rounded up or something like that. You know, something like that that would distribute board membership and therefore
Based
the
on
governing votes
population. Yeah.
based on the size of the population that each government serves.
And I don't think that we should have, I'm not sure what Natalie Hawkins is doing on there, to be honest with you. I mean,
I'm not sure what Pat Malamphy's
it's doing on there either. No,
So that's why I wonder whose initiative this was and why this meeting was called, but.
Well,
Okay, well, we'll
I
get some
agree
meetings
with,
to come up with, and we'll find out.
We're
Absolutely.
going to find out, yeah.
There's a lot that we don't know in this, and we don't know what we don't know.
we don't know, we don't know, right. And there's a lot we don't know.
Correct.
It's going to be a lot of things coming out of this that we wouldn't have anticipated.
Correct.
So we just need to be prepared for that.
So embrace it, dive into it, lead it.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if somebody has a notion that the MPO should be housed at Partners in Progress. And that might be the angle that somebody's working at here.
No, 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 no.
Sorry?
Is that a good fit?
No, it's not.
Well-
Absolutely
Well,
not.
You got a planner there.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I will tell you on first blush, I won't disagree with you, but before we get opinions, let's hear what's going on, okay?
Yeah.
Dive into it, get some information. Let's not go off half-cocked here, okay? There's a lot we don't know.
Jeff, thank you.
That may be a great place.
Update us when you feel appropriate. We'll at least talk about it at our March 28th meeting, probably earlier than that, on the 14th, whatever you feel is appropriate. And in the meantime, let us know what you're hearing as you go to these different meetings. We had one other item on the agenda, if we're done with this. Our microphone's running out. This community conversations suggestion, I think two or three of us, well, I think everybody understood the concept more or less. I'm willing to talk about this a little bit tonight, but I'm not such a fan of the idea, as I understand it, that it makes sense, but let's have a few minutes conversation. Anybody want to start with your thoughts about this particular idea that came up on one of our seminars that we listened
Up
to?
at the School of Government course, we took conflict resolution, I think was the one. And it was a mayor of another town brought it up as something that they use. I can't remember which town it was. I think her name was Mayor Alexander.
It was from Salisbury. She was the mayor of Salisbury, North Carolina.
Okay.
It
Woman, yeah.
started with a comment by the participant from Florida. And she said what
Right,
they were doing in
Florida.
Florida. And then I listened this morning. I sent you guys, I told you where to go
Yeah.
find it on the link. And it was just some general suggestions. But I do recall that a lot of other participants said, I'm interested, tell me more.
Yes.
And
And
that's where-
I recall last year sometime, there was a brief discussion about, at some point, about doing something, didn't have this formal name, community conversations around it, but it was something about having an informal discussion with citizens outside the confines of the structured council meeting with the 3-minute stopwatch and so forth. So that was triggered in my mind and the comments from others on there, which is why I said, maybe we ought to think about it. I mean, to me, the pros of it are that it wouldn't be a formal council meeting, wouldn't be voting on anything. It would be truly a listening session where we can engage with some residents. We don't know how many would show up. And there wouldn't be a stopwatch on them. And it would be that sort of informal flow of ideas. I would imagine we would put up a notice, citizens who want to come are invited to Village Hall. We would find a date where we all would be available so that we could all be here and see if there's something that comes out of that. Because our dialogues here are very structured. I think they're pretty good because we do have a lot of people come up and want to talk often. And then we have no shortage of emails we receive and phone calls. But obviously the downside of it is it might raise certain expectations. It could become an outlet for rehashing issues that may have been resolved and so forth. So anyway, I read it and want to hear everybody else's thoughts.
My view, I liked the idea when I first heard it. I thought it had some interest. I've thought about it a little bit. But I have to say that with our public comments period at our meetings, which we're required to have anyway, and people do come, and they write to us a lot, and going through the whole NAC discussion, where we're going to be working with an organization to expand it, to get feedback, I don't see where this fits as easily for us as a council now and the staff to be able to do it and spend time doing it, because I think we've got a lot of things to be looking at to accomplish. I'm all for communications. I like the idea generally. I just don't see it fitting us at this time due to commitments in other areas and the work on the NAC particularly, that I think provides a similar, if not exactly the same, kind of response that we might get from this. But
John, taking
those are
right
my
off on
thoughts.
that, when I first read this, I'm looking intrigued, and I was like, this, in my opinion, needs to be nested in NAC. I think it's a very good venue for that, and to get the communication going.
That we would have, in other words, we'd have an NAC meeting, but we would have more people invited to them.
Yeah, so more people can come if they want to talk about it. And that's where I think it'd be best nested in there, because
one way to
it's a
do it.
lot more informal. Part of the structure we have in our meetings here, it's not a matter to keep people from talking. It's to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk when we have a lot of people,
Right.
okay? And I think the NAC is a better venue for that personally.
So anyway, those are my, Lydia?
When I listened to it this morning, it's a big endeavor. I mean, I think this concept envisions going out into the fair barn or the community center
Yeah.
and telling the public we're going to be out there and invite them in. And so it's more, I would think it would take some significant planning and significant execution. And I'm just, with what we've got with going with NAC right now, that is probably the better format for now.
I think. Right. Any other comments on that? Otherwise, I think for the moment, I really don't want to pursue it, and that's what I'm hearing. Jane, you haven't commented on it, but would you wish to?
I agree with Dr. Morgan.
Okay, fine. Let's leave that off for a while, pick up other things that we have to do. But I think I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it. Is there anything else to raise tonight or in preparation for future work sessions?
One thing I'd like to raise is just, let's keep our eyes on
lady.
this. I'm sorry, what?
The lady.
Yeah, the
golf
lady.
lady. Right?
There's some low-hanging fruit in here. I don't know what our plan is to come up with a plan, but there's some low-hanging fruit. And with 2024 coming up and Ross's birthday and Olmsted's birthday, marketing might be a thing that we can do. I just don't know what our plan is to attack this thing. And we don't need an answer right now, but I think the low-hanging fruit is the visitor portion of it, which is in here. I talked about tourism and bringing visitors in, so.
I think in partial answer to that, I agree we need to look through that and look for some low-hanging fruit, but I think the initial request we need to make, and maybe they're already working on it, is a lot of the information there needs to go to the Historic Preservation Commission. There were some recommendations that were made that they consider. I know that Eric von Salzen, the media past chair, was interested in some, not so interested in others. I haven't talked to John Taylor, the current chair, about it, but I think it's with them to begin to look at some of the issues there. But there are broader issues that are council responsibility, not HPC, in there as well. So yes, we need to have an idea for that.
I don't know if I would call it low-hanging fruit, but I think that we have a real achievable opportunity to put a focused effort on sand clay path restoration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a shame that's not already built into our strategic priorities.
Well, it sort of was at one point, so I was going to elbow it back in, but
Yeah.
with the work that Jeff Batten had been doing, kind of leading up to the amenities project a little bit, and the input that Jack Farrell gave when he went out with Jeff Batten and didn't survey but located a year ago or so, some of the sand clay paths. And of course, we know one street that may already have an interest in that,
Yeah.
right in Core
Ritter.
Village. Fields Road, that whole issue there.
And I mean, truth be told, it has almost no pedestrian traffic.
Yeah,
But it's also a really easy place to restore
That's
the
right.
sand clay path, because you don't have the trees right up against the road. It's super flat. I mean, you can
Right.
go in there and put that in no time
we're talking fields.
on fields.
Yeah, as we've chatted before, yeah.
Well, does this tie into BPAC? Because now, after they do number 6, they're going to be looking at Burning Tree, and we've been taking a look at Burning Tree, and that looks like it looks like an engineering challenge. So you wonder, should BPAC be thinking about restoring sand clay paths as opposed to building new paths.
Well, I meant to ask Doug in his report tonight, and he's still with us, whether Fields or any other roads were on a list back there. I had the impression from Jeff Batten that he kind of had a list of that, and maybe they would be brought forward at some point in addition to these 3 or 4 concepts we've already adopted tonight and been focused on for the last few months. McKenzie,
Yeah.
number 6. all
Fields
that.
isn't on the list that BPAC's been looking at, so, but we could add it to the list and look at where the other sand clay paths were.
Yeah, I personally feel that would be helpful to add that there.
Yeah.
Fields, yeah. Given, okay.
Jeff
All right.
Batten is familiar with where they used to be and what condition they're in, and yes,
Okay, anything else? I think Jeff Morgan's probably got several issues he'd like to raise right now. One would be adjourn. So anyway, we'll go on. Is there a motion to adjourn the work session?
Motion.
Adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Jeff Morgan, second by Pat Pizzell. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all. It's been a very busy night.